there. So today we're going to be talking about mobility in the next 20 years. So that is kind of looking at what's been happening so far, what we expect to happen kind of in the next few years, and then how in kind of the next 20 years we see mobility taking off in terms of autonomous driving coming along. So I've got a very brief agenda. I talk very fast, so apologies. I will try and keep slow. I'm blonde, so I will talk about my previous experience very quickly. We're then going to go into kind of why mobility matters and what is happening. We'll go into some trends, and then, as always, I'll go off into a rant, I'm sure. My Twitter is @richpleeth, and my email is just richpleeth@gmail.com. So if you want to shoot me an email after this or anything else, please do, and we will go through it. I have two promises, so we have 3 slides with lots of boring text. We've done one of them already, and tweet me if you have any questions after this. So who am I? Well, I started my career at L'Oreal, hence my fantastic hairdo. I actually hated L'Oreal. I don't use shampoo. I do not use moisturizer. But unfortunately, I signed my contract while I was at university, and they gave me a sign-on bonus, which I jumped at because it bought me a lot of beer in my final year at university. So I stayed there for 3 years. As soon as I could get out, I actually ended up being recruited by Google. I joined Google to lead their B2B marketing team in the UK as their first B2B marketing hire. I then was leading the Chrome marketing team. So we launched Chrome to market and spent hundreds of millions of dollars on getting Chrome to be the #1 browser. And then I looked after the Google brand for Europe. So how the brand was perceived by the general public, but also by regulators. I left Google and joined Get Taxi, which is now known as Get. I was their global CMO, so launching into about 52 cities in the UK, Russia, Israel, and the US. Had a fantastic time, but we'll go into more detail on that in a minute. I then founded my own startup called Sup, which was a social app to see if any of your friends were nearby. And then I joined Bolt, which is the leading ride-hailing app in Europe and Africa. So we raised around $220 million, got to $1 billion valuation, and are now live in around 115 cities. So I've had it really, really fortunate to have all this experience. At the moment, I unfortunately was diagnosed with cancer in 2018. And I luckily had emergency surgery and then 10 months of chemo. I worked throughout at Bolt because I really wanted to keep my brain busy. But at the end of September last year, I agreed I wanted to kind of have some time off. I was supposed to get married in 2 weeks, but unfortunately, COVID has prevented that from happening. And I was supposed to go traveling with my fiance or wife. Unfortunately, that's also not happening. So I'm a full-time mobility consultant at the moment. And having a really good time kind of explaining what's happening in mobility to a lot of people, mostly to investment funds and to large consultancies. So when we talk about mobility, whether that be with electric scooters, whether that be with you getting a car, which could be, if you're in London, an Uber, an Ola, a Captain, a Bolt, a Via. If you're in New York, it's probably going to be an Uber or a Lyft or maybe a Via. Now, there's 5 things that matter, and this always matters. It also is kind of, if you're in a marketplace, these are the 5 things that matter. So you've got your price, you've got your ETA, you've got your quality, you've got your technology, and you've got your brand. Now, really only 2 things matter. That is the price and the ETA. So if the price is good and your ETA is low, you're most likely going to get people to use your service. If your price is high, your ETA is high, you're not going to get people to use you because there's no difference. I may as well find a car service that can get to me quickly and the price is reasonable. Now, when you think about it anywhere in the world, you think, oh, Uber, okay, I know the price is pretty reasonable. They're not going to rip me off because it's a set price. The ETA is always good. You know, I'm going to get a car within 3 to 5 minutes. I'm going to use them. Now, so if I was going to launch a new car service, let's say in London, if the price I launch with is the same price as Uber or it's slightly more, And obviously, when I launch, my ETA is going to suck because I don't have enough cars, because you have to get the number of drivers up as you slowly launch your product. And you're definitely not going to have as many drivers as Uber does. So your ETA is really going to suck. So if you're charging a higher or the same price as Uber, your ETA sucks. Why is anyone going to use you? They're not. So when you come to launch this, a car service, let's say we're launching Rich's Cars in London, we're a new mobility app. We have to make sure that the price for consumers is super low so that people start using it. We have to make sure the ETAs are as low as possible, but they're most likely going to be much longer than Uber. But because the price is cheaper, people sit at the bar and they say, hey, we can have another drink because I'm getting home for 50% less than I would with Uber today. So those are the two things that we can really focus on, but it becomes at a huge cost. So if you were to launch a car service in London, you have to basically say, I need to burn through about $200 million. Firstly, the regulator will regulate you highly. So whether that be in London, New York, Paris, wherever it is, you need to get along with the regulator, and you need to make sure that that regulator gives you the appropriate license. Otherwise, you won't be able to operate. You then need to subsidize the price. Now, we've just spoken about the price for the user, for the rider. What about the price for the driver? Well, the driver also needs to be compensated more. So if the driver is signed up, why would he sign up to this new app when there's, he has to drive much further to pick up a ride? There aren't that many rides on it at the moment. So he needs to be paid more. So not only is the consumer paying less, but the driver also has to be paid more. So you're basically having to pay both hands. So you're paying people to be in the car, and you're also paying the driver to drive the car. So it becomes phenomenally expensive. But that is ultimately the way to get people to use your car service. That's because the other three things, the quality, the tech, and the brand, they don't really matter. So the quality ultimately is the car and the driver. Now, if you jump into a car in London, New York, anywhere in the world, they will be driving for more than one app. They will not be just an Uber driver or a Lyft driver. They will say, yeah, of course, I drive for Ola because I picked you up because I'm an Ola driver. But yeah, I drive for Bolt, I drive for Uber, I drive for Via. They have no loyalty and no exclusivity. They drive for whoever is going to pay them the most amount of money at that very one time. Now, you can think of it like this. If I had a job and I have total flexibility, today I could work at job A and they pay me $100 for the day to go in. But it doesn't matter if tomorrow I just don't turn up because I go to my job B, because job B phoned me in the morning and they said, hey, look, we'll pay you $200 to come and work with us today. And there's don't worry, like if you don't enjoy it, you can just go back to job A. There's nothing holding you back from that. And they say, well, great, I'll definitely make $200 today. So you go and you make your $200. You then the next day, they don't offer you $200. They say, oh, sorry, today we can only offer you $75. And you say, well, I'm just going to go back to job A because that pays me $100 guaranteed each day. So there's no loyalty and no exclusivity. So the drivers will always go to wherever there is money. So when a new car service launches and they say, look, we're going to pay you 50% more than Uber pays you, as long as you accept 90% of the jobs, you say, absolutely, I'll sign up with you guys. So you sign up with them. It just becomes phenomenally expensive. Now, when I get into the car, the quality is exactly the same because it doesn't matter if I've called an Ola, I'm getting the same driver that could be an Uber driver, a Bolt driver, a Lyft driver, whoever he may be. So it's very hard to differentiate on quality. The only way you can differentiate on quality, obviously, is if you're getting kind of an Uber Lux, which, yes, you can get a black lane or you can get a wheelie or one of the other high quality cars or whatever it may be. And then maybe you're looking at the 5% of people who get a better quality car. But ultimately, 95% of rides are at the Uber X standard, and they drive for all of the car services. So you may, lots of people I speak to and they say, oh, I hate Uber drivers, but the Bolt drivers are so much better. And you have to explain to them, actually, they're both the same drivers. They're both the same cars. They just drive for all of the same apps because they have no loyalty, no exclusivity. So then we go into 4, the tech. Now, ultimately, the tech, yeah, if you were to argue, you could argue that Didi, which is the Chinese Uber, is much like their tech is slightly ahead of everybody. But ultimately, if you're a user and you're a driver, the app doesn't crash. it picks you up where you are and it takes you to where you want to go, you're pretty happy. Yeah, it doesn't matter if the app is a bit rubbish and it crashes a few times. It is a bit slow and clunky. As long as your first two, the price and your ETA, are good, you're going to be happy that the tech is there. And yeah, it's not great, but the price is 50% off. So I use it all the time. Now, number 5, the brand. Yeah, you know, we now use Uber. We say we're going to Uber it, just as we're going to Google it, you know, let's get an Uber. It doesn't really refer to the fact you're just going to get an Uber. It refers to the fact that you're just going to get a car. So when you arrive to a meeting, you know, someone may say, oh, I just got an Uber here. Now, maybe they got a Lyft, maybe they got an Ola, maybe we don't really know what they got, but the brand is insignificant. People don't really, because there's no branding really on the outside of cars. We obviously know that the drivers have no loyalty or exclusivity, so they're driving for all of the other brands. So it doesn't really matter which brand you are. So it's a very, very difficult business. And this is why the only real things that matter are the price and the ETA. So it's a phenomenally expensive business to get in. And everyone a few years ago said that, you know, we would have, or probably 5 years ago, they said, you know, it's the winner takes all market. And a lot of people disagreed and they said, no, you can have 1, 2 players. And I totally agree. You can have 1 to 5 players maybe, but the only person who's going to be making money is that person at the top. Everybody else is going to be spending a fortune because they have to make sure their price is lower, because their ETA is higher, and their brand awareness is lower. So they will then have to say, look, to use our car service, we're going to launch and we're going to say it's 50% off all rides. But we're also going to pay drivers 50% more than you would if you did an Uber ride. So let's say the average price is $10 for $10 for a ride. So it's £5 for a ride that you would usually pay £10 for. The driver, let's say, would usually get paid £7 for that ride. This ride, he's getting paid £14. So yeah, I'm sitting at a bar with my friend and say, hey, I've had too many, I'm gonna go home. He said, well, actually, I saw this new app launched yesterday called Rich's Cars, and they're doing 50% off. So you can get home for £5 rather than £10. So I'll tell you what, let's have another drink because the ETA is a little longer. So you're already apologizing for the terrible service you're about to get. And people will use you. The only problem there is that it's, as we said, tremendously expensive to do. So if someone came to me, an investor came to me today and said, look, Rich, we really want you to launch a car service. I'd say, well, okay, you've got to be prepared to probably invest just to get us started, $200 million. So we can get the regulation, we can sign up all the drivers, and we can have about, 18 months to 2 years of runway. And then we'll have to go and raise probably 500 million more to try and compete. There's no way to do this cheaply. You cannot cut corners because price and ETA are the only 2 things that matter. And those things take a tremendous amount of money. So what are people doing at the moment? Well, a lot of these mobility companies now, they're trying to build the best way to move people. People were looking a couple of years ago, they just, they were saying, well, the only way is you get an Uber. Yeah, that is the service that we offer. Now, obviously, Uber's branched out into jump bikes, jump scooters, shared rides with Uber Pool. We are seeing them doing rickshaws, motorbikes, and other areas. And people now, they don't want just one way to get around. They want to know that their individual need is being met. And so obviously in a post-COVID world, we can't really see that Via, which is a shared ride service, much like a public transport network, but it's private, is going to work because people are becoming more and more sensitive to being around other people with social distancing measures, just as we've seen. Now, people are going to want to use shared products less and less. So they're going to want to say, well, actually, if I'm getting a car, I want to make sure that it's been cleaned effectively. I want to make sure that there's maybe a plastic partition between the driver and the passenger. I don't want to take an Uber Pool, even though it's cheaper. I'm willing to pay the premium. I don't want to take the subway or the tube because I don't want to be in an enclosed space with many strangers. Yeah, maybe I'll use a shared scooter because I can get around from A to B in the fresh air and I don't need to be sharing a space with someone. And so there's going to be a lot of changes, but really what we saw in the last 5 years is building the best way to move people. We saw this explosion happen in LA, where Bird, which is the electric scooter, so that's like a kick scooter with an electric engine launched, they essentially were like, well, we're just going to try this because Ofo and Mobike, two Chinese companies, had launched with their bikes, the yellow bikes and then the kind of silver and orange ones. And they said, we're going to try this with electric scooters. People loved electric scooters. They were a zippy kind of novel way to get around. And if you jumped on one, you couldn't help but smile. It was much quicker because you didn't have to sit in traffic. And we know that Uber has ultimately resulted in kind of a 30% increase in traffic. These electric scooters were a genius way to get around cities. Obviously, it came with its own issues with regulation about just dropping these scooters off everywhere. It came with the huge issue of litter, that people were just dropping their scooters and they were just cluttering up sidewalks. They were dangerous for road users, pedestrians, and residents were getting extremely annoyed with it. So there were a lot of regulations that came in place. It's also hugely expensive. An electric scooter now is, back then it was costing around $500 to put on the road. 50% of them were being stolen within the first week. So the average lifetime of a scooter was about 11 days. So it just wasn't making money. Obviously now the scooters are much more expensive. They have a lot more security features built in, but it's still, a piece of kit that maybe weighs 10 kilos. I can pick it up, I can throw it in the canal, I can throw it in the bushes, I can vandalize it easily. And it becomes a very easy thing to be vandalized, and then obviously the costs increase. But if you were launching mobility now and you look at what you're doing, you have to build the best way to move whoever it may be in whichever country. In Africa, that's going to be a motorbike taxi because it's much cheaper. The traffic is terrible. People want to be able to just zip in and out of traffic. If we're looking in India, maybe that's an electric rickshaw, which we've seen launch with Ola. When we look at Gojek, which is in Indonesia, it's basically only a motorcycle taxi business. When you look at other countries in the UK, for example, electric scooters are not legal, so we can't have those on the streets. But when they are legal, there's going to be a lot of laws around how they can be deployed because each individual kind of borough in a city has a different way. In New York, they're not legal, but they're expected to be legal. But New York doesn't want the problems of having them piled up on sidewalks. So there's a tremendous amount of things to do. But what you have to remember is that everything here costs a lot of money. That's why Bird became the first company, the fastest company to get to $1 billion valuation, because they needed to burn money. They needed to subsidize people taking their scooters so they could show this kind of hockey stick growth they were having. So it became a tremendously interesting. And as we've said, it's all about choice. So if I'm a user, any one day, if it's sunny, yeah, I'm going to want to take a scooter. If it's raining, I'm probably going to want to take a car. If it's, a beautifully sunny day and I have a lot of time, then maybe I just want to walk and save some money. If I am in a city where I can't use a electric scooter, then maybe I have to take a bike or an e-bike. And it really comes down to the fact that there is this choice that the consumer can make, and that is environmental choice. That is the conditions that are choice. That's the regulatory choice. And there's a lot of stuff that is going to change, obviously, in this post-COVID world when the world actually opens up. And that kind of also brings us on to who is going to survive in the post-COVID world. And we'll go into quite a lot of detail on that as well. But let's say that now, you used to take a shared bike because it's super convenient. You can leave your bike somewhere. Lots of the shared bike schemes have gone because simply the bikes were just being stolen, vandalized. And so, Ofo and Mobike have really pulled out of London, but we've seen Jump kind of fill that void. Jump have done a great job because their bikes are very high quality. Their bikes, therefore, don't get stolen as much because people actually appreciate them. In countries where the laws are stricter, People have a greater degree of being scared against vandalizing bikes, for example. So if you look at in Russia, or you look at some of the Eastern European countries, people, there's not as high rates of vandalism as maybe there has been in France, where a lot of scooter companies and a lot of shared bike companies had to pull out purely because their vandalism rate meant that they couldn't put bikes back on the street fast enough before they were losing them. And so there's a really great story that I had from a friend. They launched their scooter company in Paris with 250 scooters and they launched them everywhere, across Paris. On day 2, they had 78 scooters, 78 out of 250. And you could go onto their live map and you could see the last known kind of GPS locations of them. And that would be kind of over the Seine next to a bridge. And you knew that that was kind of the last GPS signal that was sent before it hit the water. You could have a look and see that some of them were just in the middle of the street and their GPS signal disappeared. And I went down to one of the scooters with my friend who ran the company. I said, look, give me 4 minutes. So anyway, 2 minutes later, I'd already taken the brain off the scooter and made it my scooter, simply because it was literally as easy as kicking something off the scooter to take the actual bit that adapted the scooter to become a shared scooter. And so we're going to see a lot of changes happen, because money, is not growing on trees as it was perhaps a year ago or 2 years ago when Bird and Lime were getting these insane valuations. Lime essentially was running out of money. They had nothing. They had their e-bike business and their bike business, and then suddenly they saw Bird was exploding in growth with their electric scooters. So they decided to use their last roll of the dice to see if they could launch an electric scooter business. And very, very clever from the founders. They saw that, we have $1 million maybe in the bank. Let's see what we can do with these scooters. They ordered the scooters, they tested the scooters, they did it, and then they got a $250 million investment from Google Ventures. And yet now, there's rumors swirling around that they only have kind of 20 million left in the bank, or even less now, and they're burning kind of 8 million a month. And no one wants to give them money because they're obviously doing very minimal rides at the moment. So a lot of mobility is about luck. A lot of mobility is about finding the right choice. And a lot of mobility is about being at the right place at the right time. We're going to see that, unfortunately, for Via, for Uber Pool, post-COVID is going to be a really bad place to be in. People are going to be very concerned about sharing spaces with other people. Obviously, with the post-COVID world, where companies can say, yes, the car is cleaned between every ride, we've trained our drivers how to do that, or we clean our cars between every 2 rides, or something like that, or we put a plastic partition in. That's really going to change what actually happens. And that is like the next slide. I think the pictures that really matter. It's a sunny day, you can take a jump, or you take a scooter. You maybe take a jump because scooters are not allowed in your city. You have to look at it though. It's very expensive. Let's say you do a 20-minute commute to work. To unlock a scooter or unlock a bike, it's £1. Yeah, so it's £1 immediately that you pay to unlock one of these things, and then it's 25p a minute. So if you are doing a 20-minute commute to work, that's going to be £4 to £5 just on that commute. You've got to think, well, if I use one of these car services that has 30% off, I can probably just get a car to work every day, and I don't have to be on a bike. Using the e-bike rather than a normal bike, you don't sweat, which is a big advantage because you don't want to turn up to work sweaty. Again, with the scooter, that's a huge advantage. But again, it's very expensive, and we're going to see a big shift now after the world reopens into ownership, that people are going to say, well, I can own my own e-bike now. And we're going to see this massive boom in e-bike sales because it's much cheaper for me to do. It's also easier for me to lock up a bike outside than it is to lock up a scooter, because scooters are very easily damaged if someone comes and kicks it. A bike, for example, it's traditional. Bikes are all around the world. They're locked up. And we can see that we're going to see a lot of sales in e-bikes coming up. You know, Lyft was or is kind of the friendlier version of Uber. Are people going to feel as comfortable getting into just a soccer mom's car in the US when we see all of the issues with coronavirus? Are people going to want to get a Via that has, you know, 6 other strangers in the car? And I think one of the big things that we see there is that there are going to be a tremendous amount of changes. There are going to be companies that cannot survive. Lyft yesterday had laid off 17% of their staff, which is about just under 1,000 people. They furloughed around 300 more. So it's about 1,300 people now that are not working at Lyft. Obviously 300 will hopefully come back, but Lyft is really feeling this immediately. And we're going to see that the companies that come out of this stronger are the companies that are capitalized well. Uber has also announced they're going to lay off 20% of their workforce. Uber's not expecting to bounce back from this very fast. You know, their pool rides are going to suffer, as we've just said. So we know that Uber is capitalized extremely well. So Uber is best positioned to be there. Obviously, Didi in China is extremely well capitalized, but if you look at their ride numbers as well, it kind of collapsed. Are you going to want to maybe, instead of taking a shared car, you're going to maybe want to drive yourself? Are we going to see car sales increase? And then you have the motorcycle taxis, which in the bottom right, that's Gojek, which is the Indonesian giant. Google actually also invested in them. But you know, why is that the best way to get around an Indonesian city? Well, the traffic is literally standstill, so getting a car is just a nightmare. Taking a motorcycle taxi is convenient. There's one, literally, if you try and get a Gojek, there's one kind of within 10 seconds of you. Whenever you get it, there'll be someone there. They give out free helmets now, so you can get it. But will I be very comfortable using a sweaty helmet from someone else? Whereas, like, you know, you were last year, you're like, oh, it's, you know, I'm in India, I'm in Indonesia. Sure, I don't mind, like whatever. Or you have maybe a hairnet that you put in. You know, will you feel the same way when lockdown ends? Will you want to be sitting that close to a motorcycle driver in front of you? There's going to be a tremendous amount of changes, and we don't really know what that is going to look like. All we know is that the well-capitalized companies that have been able to cleverly furlough staff, cleverly cut down on their driver numbers, on paying drivers, whatever it may be. And this also comes to the moral point now. You know, if you're an Uber driver, at the moment, you're not really getting any rides. You know, yeah, you're maybe getting, you're doing some essential rides for doctors and nurses, but you're probably not making much money. And there are no guarantees for these people to make money. So they're going to have to apply to either universal credit, or they're going to have to try and get some self-employment help. But again, what is going to happen with these drivers that are not doing any rides at the moment? Me, you know, I am a prolific kind of Uber, Bolt, Ola user. I have no brand loyalty at all. I literally will use whichever car service is the cheapest, because I know it's the same car and the same driver. So if Captain has given me 50% off, I'll use Captain. If Ola's given me a free ride, I'll use Ola for the day. But will I feel that way after COVID-19? Probably not. You know, I was speaking to my partner, and her and I, we said, you know, we'll use our electric scooters more, or we'll bike more into the center of town, because we live in Islington, so it's very easy. But things are going to change a lot as we come out of it. And what you have to remember is that the biggest thing is that when you get a large market share, you get higher profitability. So every additional driver you get, it reduces the arrival time for riders, and therefore it means higher utilization for the drivers. And you can then, as you have higher market share, you can take higher take rates, because you say, well, look, you're so busy. So if we take 25% now rather than 15%, we're already giving you the same value because we're keeping you as busy. But then when new entrants come in, it's you know, the dynamic changes, and you can see what happens. So you really need to adapt to every single country that you're in. Now, post-COVID, who survives? So obviously we know kind of all of these companies that are here, from Lyft, which is obviously just in North America, My Taxi, which is kind of in the UK, in Ireland, in Europe, Gojek, Indonesia, Uber, obviously global, Via in the Netherlands, in the UK, in the US, under different entities, Ola, the Indian giant, which has launched in London recently, but also all over the UK and in Australia, Get, the Israeli massive kind of growth there in Israel, but really not doing very well in London because they are only black taxis, and obviously black taxis are tremendously more expensive than Uber. Captain, Daimler acquired them. They were in Paris only. They then launched in London. Daimler's acquired them, and they're going to merge with My Taxi. Didi, obviously, kind of the Chinese giant. They're going nowhere. Uber owns a 20% stake in them to agree to leave. So let's talk about Uber and Didi. So Uber decided to have this global dominance. They launched in China. Didi was there. They were fighting with Didi. Uber was burning about $1 billion a year just to compete with Didi. And eventually they knew, you know, they publicly, they said, you know, we're in it to win it. But they knew privately they were never going to win China, partly because the politics, but also because Didi was a Chinese company. That meant they could appeal to Chinese consumers. So Uber very cleverly said, look, we are going to pull out of China. They took a 20% stake in Didi, which is a genius move because you can just stop spending money in those countries. You know, they've done now the same with many companies, with Careem in the Middle East. And the more partnerships they do, we'll see the more profitable they can become. Because let's look at Uber in India. You know, they're competing with Ola. They spend over $1 billion a year just competing with Ola. If Uber said, look, we'll just take a 20% stake in Ola, and we don't have to spend $1 billion, that's brilliant news for Ola, because they don't have to they don't have to continuously compete against Uber. For Uber, they can save that $1 billion, and they say, well, look, we have 20% of this company that's worth $6 billion. Uber also did a deal in Russia. So when you look at it in there, they say, well, look, we'll take a 26% stake in Russia. We don't now need to compete in Russia and spend $600 million competing in Russia. So what we've seen is we've gone back to this kind of thought of 5 years ago that there is a one-player market and one player takes all. Because people were saying, you know, no, it's a two-player market. It's a duopoly. You can launch with Uber, and then you can have a cheaper service come in. And that cheaper service can offer, you know, because we have lower costs, we can make sure that rides are cheaper, we pay our drivers better. Lyft did exactly that. Bolt has done exactly that. And we've seen that these companies now, they're really suffering. They have struggled to raise money. They have struggled to get market share, because as soon as the discounts stop, their ETAs are not as good as the number one player. And people stop using them. So people slowly drift away towards the other main players. So the only way really to continue is to continue to burn a lot of money. Now, how do you stop burning money? So if you are Uber and you say, look, we are just, every ride we take, you know, we're only taking 25%. If we have to pay VAT, which they don't because they run it through the Netherlands or Ireland or a clever tax system, you know, we'd only take 5%, and we just can't operate like that. So we're taking 25%. So every £10 ride, we're taking £2.50. We then pay driver bonuses on top of that. So let's say that's £1. So you're taking £1.50. And then you've got to pay, you know, your entire tech team in San Francisco. You've got to pay your local teams. You've got to pay onboarding. You've got to get the money back from the bonuses you paid just to get a driver to drive for you. So how does this actually go into a world where we think that it's a sustainable business? Well, it becomes a sustainable business when we get rid of the driver. Unfortunately, there is a time when there is no longer a need for there to be someone in the front seat. Now, people are estimating that is kind of 5 years away. Maybe they think that that is correct. Personally, my view is we're 20 years away from that. My view is that Waymo, so Google's self-driving car project, is light years ahead of everyone else. If you look at Uber's self-driving car, you know, they have to have someone touching the wheel probably about once every 20 to 30 seconds. They've been involved in numerous accidents. You know, Waymo has been involved in 2 accidents. Both of them were caused by another vehicle that crashed into the back of them because the driver wasn't paying attention. They have safety drivers in the cars, and they haven't had to touch the wheel for the last kind of 3 million kilometers. They've driven on real roads. They've driven, I think, over 1 billion miles in simulators. And what we're seeing is that when you can put a car on the streets that doesn't need someone in the front seat, you're then taking approximately 100% of that. Obviously, you're going to have to pay Waymo most likely a fee for their software. And I have a prediction, which, you know, in 20 years, feel free anyone to reach out to me. But I think in 20 years' time, Google will be making more money in licensing revenue, licensing self-driving cars, than they will from their ads business. Now, that is because we will see Google is so much further ahead. They will have this standard that will say, look, we are so good at self-driving cars that it's the one that people want to use. So Daimler will sign up and say, yep, sure, we'll be using that software too. And the ride-sharing apps, they will say, yeah, okay, well, we'll give you, you know, 30% of revenue on our rides, and we'll pay you a licensing fee per year. And we will therefore make a lot more money because they don't have to pay the driver, and they'll be taking 70% instead of the 25%.
Rich, sorry, can you hear me? Sorry to interrupt, but I think you're 11 minutes over your time and the next guy wants to start.
Oh, thought it was 12:30.
It's not a guy, it's a girl.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, it's a girl that's waiting. I apologize. Yeah, I just wanted to... yeah, no, I think it's yours was scheduled until 1.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, sorry. I will bow out now. I'm so sorry for running over. I hope everyone enjoyed that. If you do have any questions, just send me an email, richpleeth@gmail.com.
Yeah, maybe you can post that in the comments. That would be great.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Bye. Sorry.
Thanks a lot, Rich. That was a very, very useful presentation. Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry for overrunning.